and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on.
I'm awash with this stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavor show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to the debate. So the material before us, it provides this really stark, compelling depiction of a family that is just stretched to its absolute breaking point. We are focused on the immediate aftermath of George's hospitalization following a violent attack, and, well, specifically centered on that critical moment of his attempted return home, that family meal that was supposed to be for reconciliation.
And that meal, of course, is derailed entirely by Eddie's decision to prioritize a farm task over being there. And that specific incident, this choice of duty, is where the material truly sharpens its focus on the costs of survival. We're presented with two utterly incompatible demands. On one hand, you have the immediate searing need for emotional and psychological healing after profound trauma. And on the other, it's pitted against the cold, non-negotiable demand of the agricultural livelihood that sustains them.
Right, absolutely. And I think that tension, that's what really defines our core question today. Does Eddie's decision to prioritize making hay over attending this crucial family lunch with his recovering grandson George, does that reflect a necessary long-term familial responsibility that's rooted in the land? Or is it a destructive avoidance of immediate emotional duty?
I'm going to be arguing, based on the immediate emotional devastation we see, that Eddie's choice is a profound failure of emotional responsibility. I mean, it accelerates the collapse of the family unit right when immediate physical presence was the only stabilizing force they had.
And I will argue that Eddie's actions are, they're the tragic consequence of a non-negotiable fundamental duty, the role of the provider. He is acting on a wisdom that's derived from generations, prioritizing the material foundation that is the only true guarantee of long-term security for everyone, including George, in the wake of all this chaos.
So we have to look at what evidence actually defines these duties.
Well, my position, it really rests on understanding the, let's call it the agricultural mindset, where duty it's existential. Eddie isn't making a choice between seeing his grandson and, some social event. He is fulfilling a fundamental obligation. And he frames it with absolute clarity to Clary when he says, "The animals want feeding, the land wants tending. That's our lot in life, Clary. And if it stops, then we all go under." I mean, this is not about maximizing profits. This is about preventing the entire system from crashing. This mindset, it frames his choice as one of ultimate necessity, taught to him by his father, Old Joe, a duty that supersedes temporary emotional demands.
I appreciate the weight you place on that existential framework. And look, I don't deny the physical demands of farming. However, I would frame that lot in life not as necessity, but as a rationalization for avoidance. While the farm may face material threat if it's neglected, the family unit itself, as Clary observes, is currently falling apart. I mean, George almost died. The crisis is emotional and it is immediate. The material shows that Eddie's decision is seen by his family, specifically Clary, as merely another get-rich-quick scheme. And that right there demonstrates the immediate damage done when he prioritizes profit over the immediate well-being of a profoundly traumatized grandson.
His decision. The evidence is clear. There is big demand for high-quality hay at the moment. And what's more, because of his foresight, and he says this, we looked after our meadow and got our cut nice and early, he is now able to pick and choose customers. He is capitalizing on a fleeting market opportunity to generate what he calls a tidy sum. And that sum, it's not just spare cash. It is the vital stabilization mechanism that protects the farm from debt, allows for crucial repairs, or avoids having to sell off livestock. This financial stability is the highest form of protection he can offer George following the attack.
I see why you think that securing a financial anchor is paramount, but that definition of protection it's fundamentally incomplete. You're prioritizing the farm's survival over the person's survival. The financial gain, however significant that tidy sum might be, it came at an immediate, devastating, and entirely avoidable emotional cost. Eddie's absence directly triggered William's explosion and George's evident heartbreak. We are told George is physically weak, looking thin, and has lost his appetite. I mean, that's a classic sign of trauma and depression. He required his grandfather's presence as an emotional anchor, and Eddie chose the field instead. This choice proves he valued the material commodity over his grandson's immediate psychological recovery. And that is where the definition of familial duty fails.
This is precisely the hinge point of our debate, though. It's how we define family responsibility. I maintain that the long-term material responsibility is the true measure of a patriarch's commitment. Ensuring the farm continues, ensuring the family has a home and a livelihood post-attack. This provides the very foundation for any future healing. When Eddie cites the approval of his own father, Old Joe, I reckon that's what Old Joe would want. He is invoking a multi-generational definition of duty. It's non-negotiable, it's fundamental, like lambing. You cannot decide not to attend a UN labor because you have a personal appointment.
I'm sorry, but I have to push back on that a little. I just don't buy that the whole lambing analogy really holds up here. Not when we're discussing a deeply human emotional debt. The physical act of saving a lamb is immediate, it's concrete, and it has a clear outcome. Emotional labor is harder, sure, but it is no less fundamental. The family's emotional infrastructure is collapsing. When Clary states, "Our family is falling apart," that structural failure is far more catastrophic than a delay in turning hay. What value is long-term stability if the family unit is permanently fractured today? Eddie is trading the visible, immediate emotional safety of a deeply traumatized child for a temporary financial cushion.
Let's explore the implications of that cushion, though, because I think anyone who understands farm economics knows how fragile it is. If Eddie misses this high-demand window for his high-quality hay, the farm may incur debts that means selling off vital assets later in the year, like cattle. Now, that sale would truly undermine George's future. Eddie is looking ahead. He's sacrificing immediate comfort for structural resilience. If that tidy sum means they avoid a massive, destabilizing debt, then surely the pain of missing one lunch is the lesser of two evils.
Introducing the Archer's Mug, where elegance meets everyday comfort. Crafted from premium white ceramic, designed with vibrant peekaboo colors inside, simple, modern, and stylish. Start your day the Archer's way, with warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of voices you've come to love. As the stories unfold on the Archers, let this mug become part of your daily ritual, a small reminder of life in Ambridge. Practical for every home, dishwasher and microwave safe. Available in 2 sizes, 11 ounces and 15 ounces, designed to fit your lifestyle. Enjoy your favorite drink in a mug that connects you to Britain's most beloved countryside story, The Archers. For more information and to order your very own The Archers mug, follow the link below and make it part of your daily routine.
That is a persuasive argument for pragmatic trade-offs, but it only works if you assume the family can absorb infinite psychological damage. The material vividly shows that the family's capacity to absorb more pain has reached zero. George's face said he were heartbroken. This isn't just temporary distress. This is trauma compounding trauma. And frankly, the invocation of Old Joe suggests that Eddie is relying on an archaic, maybe even a psychologically damaging, generational definition of duty. One that conflates emotional repression with stoic necessity. He is choosing the manageable predictability of the land over the terrifying, unpredictable complexity of human emotions.
And that terror is real, which brings us to the most complex dimension of Eddie's choice. I believe Eddie's focus on work is far more than just economic necessity. It is a necessary coping mechanism, a retreat. His choice to make hay is a highly functional rationalization, yes, but it is deeply rooted in unresolved emotional difficulty, specifically the deep, lingering resentment from George's past actions involving Edward and Alice.
I agree. That avoidance is the real driver here, masked by the hay excuse. The material is very clear about this. Eddie admits he hasn't forgotten or forgiven George. The hay provides a perfect, logical, non-blameworthy shield. It is an escape hatch from the overwhelming burden of confronting an injured grandson whom he still deeply resents for what he's done. Eddie knew George wanted to speak to him to sort things out. By choosing the isolation and manageable demands of the hay barn, he actively avoided the necessary but painful labor of reconciliation.
I've acknowledged the deep pain in the avoidance. Eddie is navigating genuine conflicting loyalties, admitting to Clary, a man can only be pushed so far. Maybe I am a different person. But is the work necessarily just an avoidance? I'd suggest it is also a path toward processing internal chaos. The land is reliable. It gives back what you put in. When the emotional world of the family is chaotic, judgmental, and riddled with unreconciled guilt, retreating to the land allows Eddie to perform a simple, tangible duty. It allows him to manage the pain, however imperfectly, without actively causing more destruction, which a face-to-face meeting with George might have done, given his admitted lack of forgiveness.
The mechanism of coping cannot negate the impact on the victim. His emotional difficulty does not excuse the abandonment. He is projecting his unresolved resentment onto George, who is already physically and psychologically vulnerable. By making hay, Eddie is essentially guaranteeing that the wounds he feels, the pain of what George did to Alice and Edward, are transferred onto George again. And this just confirms William's greatest suspicion, that George is still unforgiven, even after being brutally attacked.
But if he had attended the lunch while still holding that deep-seated, unforgiven hurt, the exchange might have been even more damaging than his absence. He risked unleashing unresolved generational conflict onto George during a fragile moment. He chose withdrawal over confrontation, perhaps recognizing his own current psychological inability to offer genuine comfort.
That's a compelling argument for self-preservation, I'll grant you. But the evidence of George's reaction, the heartbreak, the loss of appetite, suggests that withdrawal was interpreted as the ultimate confrontation, abandonment. And this leads us directly to the consequence of that choice, which is the explosion it catalyzed in the family dynamic, specifically William's reaction.
Yes, indeed. Let's shift our focus to William. I argue that William's reaction was disproportionate and ultimately destructive. It proves that the family volatility was already inherent and just waiting for any slight trigger. Eddie's absence, while painful, did not justify William's extreme behavior. William told Clary, "Hope he chokes on it," regarding the shepherd's pie, and then he forced George to leave the lunch despite Clary's desperate pleas. "Don't leave, please. Grandma's done shepherd's pie."
I see it a different way. William's fury, though extreme, is a necessary barometer of the material's focus on betrayal. William is acting as the immediate protector of George against a perceived, profound abandonment by the family patriarch. When the family leader prioritizes profit over the injured child, William steps in to prevent further psychological injury. That phrase, "hope he chokes on it," isn't just anger. It is a declaration of war against Eddie's priorities, a profound rejection of the idea that financial survival trumps emotional necessity.
But William's behavior actively sabotaged the healing moment Clary worked so hard to create. He messaged his dad demanding to know his excuse, essentially setting up the confrontation, and then used Eddie's absence to seize control and inject chaos. He didn't just feel betrayed, he actively capitalized on the betrayal. His aggressive destruction of the moment Clary tried to facilitate suggests the inherent volatility was already driving William's actions far beyond what Eddie's temporary absence warranted.
I think you misunderstand the depth of William's protective instinct, though. George is suffering, and the adult leader, Eddie, has abandoned his post. William's intense reaction is a reflection of the fact that the material demonstrates that Eddie's choice directly catalyzed the fragmentation. Clary herself notes, "I've never seen William so furious." Eddie's choice provided the match that lit the structural instability, validating William's suspicion that George's well-being was secondary to the farm ledger.
We have to hold Eddie responsible for the absence, yes, but William for the escalation. If Eddie had chosen to stay and suppress his true feelings for the sake of appearances, the underlying resentment would still linger. By choosing the farm, Eddie secured the foundation. By forcing George to leave, William chose immediate emotional satisfaction, his own satisfaction, in confronting the perceived betrayal over the long-term goal of family unity that Clary was so desperately trying to achieve with a simple meal.
But William's anger is understandable when we consider George's acute, fragile state. George needs his grandfather's explicit, tangible support now, given the attack and the looming court proceedings. Eddie chose financial gain and emotional avoidance, thereby cementing the feeling of unforgiveness. William's dramatic exit is the only reasonable response to that tangible failure of the patriarch to prioritize people over profits, regardless of the ultimate value of that hay. Eddie's withdrawal was passive aggression. William's response was active protection.
And yet, if we look at the whole picture, the family's history is defined by enduring, by pushing forward despite catastrophic emotional debt. Eddie's behavior, however painful, falls into a pattern of prioritizing endurance above all else. This definition of duty, while harsh, is not destructive. It is simply structural.
I would argue that pattern of emotional repression is exactly what caused the crisis William is now reacting to. The structure is surviving at the expense of the people within it.
You know, ultimately, I still stand by the necessity of the land. To sort of wrap this up, while Eddie's choice was, look, it was undeniably painful and caused immediate familial distress, his reliance on the foundational duties of the land provided a structure for material survival. The ability to pay the bills, maintain the stock, avoid debt, that's what the family will ultimately benefit from. The stability derived from that tidy thumb is Eddie's tragic, pragmatic way of ensuring we will endure. It is a necessary cost of their way of life.
I agree that the material vividly illustrates the profound tension between pragmatic material survival and necessary emotional reconciliation, but I have to stress the unsustainable nature of building a future on emotional neglect. The material clearly shows the immediate cost of avoidance is the family structure itself. Regardless of the hay's monetary value, the evidence just screams that the family is falling apart. Eddie chose temporary relief from hard feelings over the necessary labor of emotional repair, suggesting that the most vital crop, family unity, was left to wither.
So the material leaves us to weigh which duty carries greater weight during this unique moment of crisis. The material anchor that ensures future existence, or the immediate psychological needs that ensure present cohesion.
Right. The conflict between enduring the land and enduring the trauma remains unresolved. And that really highlights how deeply these fundamental competing duties shape every single decision made in this complex family drama. There is certainly much more to explore in how these roles are inherited and enacted across generations.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just
And,
moving mics around.
So, what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the arches. Any
Are you what we
movements
call Foley then?
and- kind of. Yep. That's,
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
yep. That's the ball bar. That's,
This one.
yep. That's.
Haley so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. No. I mean, it would have been a stretch for them financially, mind, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help them, Caroline.
I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever